Well, welcome back to Be a Refuge podcast. We have a special guest that I've known for maybe 6 or 7 years now, and Kathy's known a bit longer. So I'd love to pass it on to Kathy.
Yeah, we're so happy to have our friend Suzann Mollner with us today. She's the founder and director of Beirut and Beyond, which is really dedicated to relationship and reconciliation and resources alongside Palestinian refugees. And so I am amazed at time because we met a long time ago now, and because it was before you started Beirut and Beyond.
Wow.
And we met Suzann through our friend Phyllis Mathis, who has been a long time, since really early on in the life of the refuge, just a supporter and cheerleader, and hosted School of Life for a long time. And Suzann and Phyllis go way back from old church days and introduced us to each other. And one of the things that I am so grateful for Suzann is just her heart, her passion, her guts, and her willingness to put relationship and witness first in a world that a missionary kind of old school world that values 2 things and 4 things that has disparate power. So Suzann has been connected to the refuge for a long time. 10 years ago, though, we hosted a learning party that was centered on learning about Palestinian refugees. And so we're just so happy to have you here as kind of a piece of Be a Refuge. These are friends that we play with, and this is part of our ethos and what we want to do in the world, and then helping everyone who's listening learn more about the work that you're doing in the world.
Well, thanks. It's always a pleasure to be with you guys. I mean, it always feels like I'm coming home a little bit, you know. It's usually a safe space.
That's a good little clause.
Usually.
Well, so tell us like more about what you do. What is Beirut Beyond, and how did you enter into that? And sort of, 10 years, you've been doing the work a lot longer than 10 years, but on your own in this organization for 10.
Yeah, so it's our 10-year anniversary this year for Beirut Beyond, which is kind of a miracle. I first visited the Middle East in 2004. So I've actually been working with Palestinian refugees for 19 years now. And quite frankly, I started off as a missionary and was very traumatized in Beirut through several wars. And I had moved my whole life over there, and I had to come back in 2010 back to America because I just couldn't function anymore, living in that kind of violence, and then the secondary trauma of working with a marginalized people group was just too much. And I just didn't want to do a missionary thing anymore. I think after you live with in another culture with a people group, it doesn't really make sense anymore. Like, you see people, your mission doesn't make sense anymore. I mean, you see people that are trying to live out their faith in the best way that they can in a ton of obstacles that you will never have to face in your life. I just came back kind of a shell. Like I had a faith shift. I was traumatized, and I definitely did not want to work with refugees anymore. And after some counseling and a couple of years, I started Beirut Beyond, because I'm like, how am I a good steward of what I know? Like, how I know so much about, I worked for years in refugee camps that most Americans don't even know about, right, in the Middle East. So how can I be a good steward? And I didn't want to work for another organization. I wanted to do things the way I wanted to do. Hate power right there. So I really wanted the focus to be on refugees. I think a lot of times in the nonprofit world, people focus on their own organizations and their territory and their work and their mission. And the people that they're serving get lost a little bit or used, right, to further donations, that kind of stuff. So I set it up, so I couldn't have an ego in it, right? I set it up, so we have to partner with Palestinian-led organizations, and then we support what they're doing. So they tell us what they need. I'm not going into the camps telling them what I think they need, because they're serving their own community. So how are we supporting people with limited resources that are trying to make a difference in their own communities? And that's kind of what I wanted to do. And I wanted to be a mouthpiece kind of for them and amplify. Because I think so many times we think of marginalized groups or refugees, and it's all sad, right? They're just sad, they're uneducated, they don't know how to do anything. And I really wanted to highlight the work, how they're fighting for themselves and their communities. So that's kind of what we do. Like we partner, we have partnerships in Beirut where I lived, and then in Jordan. And it's hard to do the work that way, right? It would be much easier just to go in and say, here you go, here's what I want done with this. Because relationships kind of put you in a vulnerable position, right? And we want to be in a position of power and control. And I really feel like it balances out the power, and then you're actually really in a real, true partnership, working together.
I love that. So I wasn't there when you first connected to the refuge, and I'd love for both of you to kind of talk about, I mean, Kathy mentioned a learning party, but how did that happen, and how has that been supportive or unsupportive over the years, or how's that relationship look?
I mean, it really helped us build a foundation. I mean, I started Beirut Beyond on September 1st, 2013.
Okay.
To many crickets. I mean, I had lost 80% of my funding because people are like, you're going off the rails, you're not a missionary anymore, this, I don't trust you, like you have pictures of the camp and that has pictures of Yasser Arafat. And I mean, I literally lost support over that. I'm like, I'm not promoting Yasser Arafat, that's what the camps look like. Like, that's the reality. And Kathy was one of my biggest cheerleaders at the time, and agreed to host a learning party. And she knew me personally, but she had no idea of what I was going to do or say. And I feel like it was a risk for the refuge to do that, because anytime you say Palestinian, people are like, oh, you're being political, or you're anti-Semitic, or all of these things, particularly in Christian circles. And, I always have to I always have to do a disclaimer, in the beginning of any teaching that I do. It's like, we're actually just talking about a people group and a story. And that's all I want to share today. And I think Kathy reached out to not just refuge people, but a ton of other people. And it helped me gain an audience and build relationships with other people. It was a very significant event for us, and it really helped build a foundation for the teaching that I still do today.
That makes me so happy. What were you going to say?
I was just going to ask about, I mean, we have probably a wider audience here of like some people who are, from Christian backgrounds, some people who aren't, and different kind of things. And most people are familiar with the conflicts and politics around things. But I would love just a overview of some of the pushback you've had from church people around this, because it's, I mean, if that's not too upsetting to talk about.
I mean, I could spend hours on this. Unfortunately, anytime I teach in a church, that's when I get the most pushback. I've taught at universities, I've taught at other nonprofits, I've presented, and people are very receptive. I've had, in a church setting, I had someone call me a liar, like stand up. I've had people bring full-size Israeli flags and plop them in front of my presentation. I think you're telling people something they don't want to hear. I think they want to believe the story that, Israel was a land without people for people without a land. And that was great propaganda, but that's not true. And I think we can want safety for the Jewish community and for Israelis, and then look at this piece of displacement for Palestinians and injustice. It's going to be 75 years this year that Palestinians are refugees. So I work with third and fourth generation of refugees without any sort of pathway to citizenship anywhere. And we don't really think about what that means. Like, if you are not protected by the state, then who protects you? Who offers you rights, basic human rights like healthcare, education, employment? That's what they struggle with. And so I think what happens is when you talk about it, particularly in church groups, it challenges the narrative that they want to believe, the biblical narrative of the biblical state of Israel, right? Or the biblical country of Israel, because right now it's a state, right? It's a nation state. And like other nation states, they do horrendous things to protect their own interests. So I think, people will just give me Bible verses on why I shouldn't feed Palestinians or serve them. It's just, I just think you're telling people something they don't want to know, and it hurts them to have to think about it, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
It makes me think too. I mean, this is like a part of us, is that we are indoctrinated and culturized for certain stories and narratives. And I think that your work, why it's so crucial, is like really telling a different story. And anytime our stories conflict with what we were taught, like, we're disrupted and we don't know what to do with it. And I remember for me, and this is before this, I think it's before Beirut and Beyond. I can't remember the exact year. I went to Israel and Palestine with my mom. This had nothing to do with the refuge. This was like a lifelong dream, because I'm 25% Jewish. My mom is 50%. And so this was like this thing my mom wanted to do. And so we went with somebody who had lived in Palestine, an American pastor, and she kind of helped us do a few things. But the truth was, I had no idea. I literally had no idea. And when we saw and went into the camps and saw, it was really rocking, and heard stories that shared, how Palestinians can't use the Tel Aviv airport. Like, nobody thinks about that. Like, they're not there. And you know what? It didn't register, it didn't register. Like, why am I not seeing certain people? And then learning more. And when I came back, we met, I remember, and I was like, I need to process some of this with you. We went to lunch, and I was like, this was a lot. And then we ended up bringing a group back a couple of years later. And this was, some people were connected to the refuge and some in different circles, but we went again because I wanted Jose to go, my husband, because we were in that pro-Israel kind of thing that was just taught in some of the churches, and then my kids' school and things like that was just embedded, and I just didn't know the other story. And I remember when we were in a camp and the question like really emerged, this was the first trip, like what can we really do? And the number one thing was, tell our story. Tell our story. And that, it gives me chills when I hear it. When we went back, we brought back a few people. It's the second trip. Kind of went in a little skeptical, until they saw. And Jose, who's, he's not an Enneagram 8 like you, but he's got a strong 8 wing, and he will question things and push things. And I wish he was here in this conversation, honestly, today, because his world got rocked. And then he has told everybody about it, because it comes up in some of the more conservative circles that he's in sometimes. And so I just want to really honor the power of your work, because on the whole, everyone there doesn't have a venue to share their stories. And that is something that you do without taking their stories and using them to do this or that, but like really helping expand your friends' stories so that people can learn.
I think kind of, Kathy, what you said, I think we've touched on this before in other conversations, but I think like narrative, I think it all comes down to narrative, like who we listen to. And we always listen to the group in power. You know, people that are powerless, somehow we don't think their stories matter, or we're not in tune to listening. It solidified with me. I was on a speaking tour with it was called Churches for Middle East Peace. They're out of Washington, D.C., and they advocate for peace between Israelis and Palestinians. And they really stand up for Palestinian rights. And we were on a speaking tour. I was talking about Palestinian refugees. There was one of my co-speakers was Jewish that worked for the organization. And then we had a Palestinian, my friend Abada. And I always went last, right? So the Jewish lady from Churches for Middle East would start off, and then Abada would go. And then by the time I would go, people had had enough, right? And they didn't want to hear about Palestinian refugees. And this guy, I'll never forget, it was in California. He was so angry, and he was talking over me and and all of this stuff. And, you know, we're not about peace because it's so lopsided. And I'll never forget what Abada said to him. He said, "Why do I have to have an Israeli sitting here for you to listen to my story?" Mm-hmm. And you know, because it's like we always want to like do this kumbaya thing where we put like the oppressor and the oppressed together so we feel more comfortable listening to it. And it diffused this guy, like, and Obama was able to have a conversation with him after. But I'll never forget that. It's like, why do we do that? We always do that. We need to feel more comfortable listening to people without power, their story. And we always want to put them next to their oppressor so we feel a little bit better, so they can like do this reconciliation thing, and then we can feel good. Oh my gosh, it's so ridiculous. We continue to, you know, marginalize them.
Let it rip. Let it rip.
Yes.
But anyway, that's kind of what, you know, when you're talking about that and seeing it, we just have a really hard time listening to narrative if it's a person from a different religion. You know, Muslims, don't even get me started, like, or Arabs. And I think, you know, anytime there's a conflict, we pick someone who's right and who's wrong, and then we side with them instead of looking at the multiple narratives of each event.
Yeah, that's I mean, I think that's very human, but we also have the capacity to not do that. So it's easier because black and white thinking is easier than nuance, right? It's easier to be like,
safe, right? It keeps you safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and contained and controllable. You know, it's like, you're bad, they're good. That's way easier than, this is a complicated situation, and let's just sit with that complicatedness and this story and actually just be with a person.
Yeah, or the pain of it or the suffering of it. We just don't do well with sitting with that.
What's helped sustain you over the years? I mean, 10 years and beyond, far beyond that, of sitting with pain. That's a pretty deep. You can pass on that question if you don't want to. I just went right to it.
You know, I mean, I want to give up all the time, right? Like, it's hard, and I feel like people don't want to hear what I have to say because it's not militant enough. Like, if you're pro-Palestinian in this country, then you have to be more militant, and I'm just not. I don't feel like it helps share Palestinian narrative by doing that. I think one of my former board members was the first time I met her. She was a DU professor, and she came to one of the events I did at a church, and she came up to me afterwards, and she was like, "I don't know how you sat there and took it. Like, people just like plummeting you." And I said, "You know why? Because I thought about my Palestinian friends. I thought about who they are, what they're up against every day. And if I could actually build a bridge for this person to actually experience the truth of their lives. That's actually what keeps me honest in it, because I think everything's so bad for me, right? And then I remember, you know, my friends and what they get up every morning and have to face, which is something that I'll never, ever be able to fully comprehend as someone that has citizenship and privilege. So, you know, that's kind of how I keep going, is that actually helps in advocating for other people to actually have real relationships like, with the group that you're advocating for. It keeps you honest.
Yeah. It helps us not give up. You know, our work is different, but it has some of the same streams and some of the same core values. And it's like with the people in front, you know, it just, because we're talking about friends. You have long-term relationship, like you've seen the whole story and you're connected and they text you, and, you know, it's not just about, people have a misconception. It's not just about asking for needs to get met. It's sharing amazing stories and things that happen in real lives, and, you know, kind of that long-term, long haul incarnational relationship. And it is underrated and misunderstood. And I think for like watching you and knowing your work, I think one of the pieces that I respect so much is that it is about relationship. Like that is the thing, and that you are aware of your power. And so you doesn't mean that you turn off your power. It means that you respect it and notice it, and then lay some things down for what's healthy and good, to let others rise and lead, and you follow. And that is a different thing, because we're just taught in sort of these kinds of organizations, like we're supposed to lead and people are supposed to follow, and then shifting it and letting people lead and then we follow.
You know, Kathy, I think when you when you work with a group that has zero rights, right? They, you know, like you see the day-to-day and the circle that they're caught in, and it really challenged me, like what do I use my rights? Like, are my rights just for myself, or how do I use them to benefit others? You know, that's kind of the conclusion I came to, because it's like, I don't think those rights are just for me. And I think we have that mentality in the US, you know, as Americans, like they're my rights, right? It's about me. But how do you actually really use the rights that you have to leverage your privilege? Like, how do you leverage that for others that don't have those same rights? And that's kind of really what that's really what I want to do. Like, honestly, that's my whole heart in this. And it, you know, the teachings of Jesus, like that to me is like this guy like hung on a cross. So like he gave everything up, right? So that's why Christianity in the US is like so mind-boggling to me. Like, it's not about your rights. Like, I'm pretty sure you gave them all up.
So good.
Well, and that just, that downward way of empowering, and instead of enabling or dominating and using. And, you know, like I also come from a missions background and have seen all sorts of things, and some positive things, but a lot of just really troubling things, and especially in how marginalized people are used for fundraising, and, you know, things that we wouldn't ever, like, you wouldn't take a picture of your friend's baby and like sell it. Yeah, hopefully, you know, but we do that. We go, you know, people go overseas and they'll take all these pictures, and, you know, these organizations without people's consent, and just not even view them as things, not as people, and as a way to raise money. And it's, you know, this huge machine that that's kind of disturbing in some ways.
Just to note, like, we take pictures of them at their worst,
Yeah.
like in the most traumatic events that happen to them that are personal and painful and private, and then we publicize it.
Yeah.
That's what's so disturbing to me.
And it just shows, it doesn't show the whole picture, because your friends go through suffering, but they're freaking resilient.
Yeah.
And they have so much joy. And like, how many cups of tea have you shared, or handfuls of rice that, like, you know, of people who maybe have hardly anything, but they're just love to have you in their home and just share that joy, and like in the midst of their suffering and hardship. Like, it's so much more of a full picture than what we see. And like, you know, that raises money if you show all this desperation and flies around the eyes and all this stuff, but it's not a person. Like, we're all a weird mix of all of that stuff, you know?
A weird mix of beauty and suffering. And I think that's what I've experienced with Palestinians, is the beauty of their culture and learning from them and learning generosity. Like you said, I've sat on the floor of homes and refugee camps, and they give me the best of what they have.
Yeah.
You know, and that is super humbling, and you don't want to accept it. Like, no, just please save that for yourself. It's just whatever I feel like I give to them, I get it like 10 times back. And it's super, super humbling.
It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And it just really makes me think, you know, kind of going back to this long story of friendship, and with you, and that, like, having kindreds in town and being able to talk about these things, and we're together, and like how hard it is, but how we're still here, how messy it is, but then how beautiful it is, and how annoyed we get about certain systems, and how we find ways around it. And I just want to say that it really is, it does embody how we last. And so you help us last. You do. And we watch you, and we see you, and we want to support you. And when sometimes you go, we're grateful when we can kind of hold that, and you can share updates, and some of our people connect to things. But creating those spaces for learning parties, that was kind of our thing before. We had done a few over the years, but I'm going to say in our life, because this was in our new building, like that we got a facility for the first time that was ours to use. And I remember it. I can picture the space. I can picture you there. I can picture everybody learning. I knew that there was a little resistance here and there, and you just hold that in such a beautiful way. And we want to be a refuge like that for you. That you have a place, like a landing place that goes, yeah, I don't have to come all the time. I don't come all the time, but I know they're there supporting me, and that they will help other people learn. And that is something that is super important to us as a hub for healing community, social action, and creative collaboration. I feel super grateful for it.
Yeah, I'm super grateful that anytime I do show up, like, people recognize who I am, and they're super welcoming. Like, I never feel like I'm not accepted there. And that's a big thing. It's a big thing that you guys do.
And your learning has helped my kid. You know, this is what's really special is my son Jonas, like, he got it. It makes me want to cry. He got it. He heard you. And then he learned more. And then he got involved in his college, Justice for Palestine, and he loves and believes in Beirut Beyond. He's always like, Suzann is so awesome.
He's so awesome. That kid, you know, that kid is amazing, and how he supports us is amazing. Yeah.
Makes me happy. The future's in good hands. Better hands, at least.
Yeah. Agreed.
All right. Well, should we do some rapid fire questions?
Oh boy.
Let's do it. You got this.
I need more coffee.
I'll start. They're not hard.
Okay.
What is your theological? No, just kidding.
Oh God.
Just thought I'd get your blood pressure going. What's the one word that best describes the refuge for you?
Hope.
Hope. I keep connecting with the refuge community because
Safety.
Hmm.
The most irritating part of the refuge is.
Oh my gosh, the chaos.
We feel you.
Oh, I love
I know you guys.
Perfect.
So being part of the refuge the way that you are, just that, connecting when it works and how it works, being part of it that way has helped me or helped you, ...
Help me trust in a community.
No small thing for an 8 to say.
That's no small thing for an Enneagram 8 to say. I trust no one.
Well, we're honored. We're
Yeah.
super honored. And we're grateful. And thank you for this conversation. And we'll just say, check out the work of Beirut and Beyond. It's beirutandbeyond.org. Suzann, has modified some of the material over time, making it more accessible online, and does host these learning opportunities. There's a cooking class coming up in Denver, a Palestinian cooking class, lots of events, lots of things, and follow them on social media, because you are guaranteed to learn. Every single time I read any kind of graphic or anything, the stories, I learn every single time.
And we're working on hosting a live learning party again. So probably in April, which is going to be the first time we've done it live since COVID. So stay tuned.
Awesome.
All right, so our closing round, we kind of just share, and this is something we do at our other refuge gatherings too, but I'm leaving today with a little bit more or a little bit less of something.
I go first.
If you'd like, yeah.
Energy, I think. I'm leaving with more energy. I feel filled up. How's that?
I love it. Kathy?
I'm leaving with a little more connectedness and energy also. Like, I just feel that thing that goes, so grateful for it. Helps sustain.
Yeah. I feel more seen and known because my heart is so similar in some ways. And so I'm just feeling an affection and gratitude.